To our next conversation now, startups in Nigeria and other African countries raised over $4.85 billion in 2022, according to data from Africa, the big deal. While this could still cross $5 billion after delayed funding announcements from investors are made. Let's get a sense of how startups navigated regulation and taxes and what to expect in 2023. Talking about trends. Join me now is Rosemond Phil of Ihiwa, corporate commercial attorney and partner at Debo Akonde LLP. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure being here.
Nice.
Thank you.
So quite an impressive raise, by Nigerian startups. Break it down, because obviously I know regulation is still an issue,
of course,
for that industry and most of these SMEs. How was it for them? How bearable was the Nigerian system for them?
Well, looking back from the post-COVID era down from 2021 into 2022, as much as the figure sounds large, it was actually quite a slight drop from 2021. And the reason is because, of course, the global instability really contributed to that as well. But in terms of regulation, as we all know, there was a new Finance Act, of course, which was in 2021 that was signed. And you have a lot of these startups having to grapple with so much regulation. Right? Even out of that 4.8 billion, 75% of that came from primarily 4 African countries. Of Nigeria, about 1.2 billion, right, causing that funding. And this was just the undisclosed rounds. Now, if you look at how startups have navigated the process, it's really just coming to terms with the innovations and the continuous iteration processes that the government have brought, right? Started with 2022 coming up with so many introductions as to, of course, VAT for non-resident companies. And then, of course, you have tax, of course, of digital companies and all that. And now you already know that there's a new finance bill that is already up. And then there's going to be the taxation, of course, of digital assets and all that. So there's just a lot of regulation going on. Well, to some extent, it's been quite bearable. And, of course, to culminate the end of 2022, you had the Startup Act, which was obviously signed into law, which is an attempt by the federal government to be able to, bring all these regulators together. If there's one thing that stands out for me is that these regulations in itself is not just going to be scattered here and there. For me, the essence of acts and laws is for proper and prompt implementation. If you're dealing with laws that are primarily in a technologically driven economy, then those laws have to catch up, because technology is such a fast-moving sprint. So the fundings were good. Of course, primarily about 37% of them was in the fintech alone. Of course, we know that. We have those in health tech, agri-tech, edu-tech, and the rest. So it was quite a good run. But I would say that there's a lot more innovation. There's a lot more, putting these regulations together to ensure that it's not really cumbersome. So there's a lot that the Startup Act has come to do. So I think, for me, that would be like my topmost regulation, apart from, of course, the taxes that everybody, has.
And with the Startup Act, how much clarity is it, bringing to the table, looking at 2023?
Oh, yeah, I think it's a lot of clarity now, because now a lot of attention now is going to be brought down. The market right now is trying to stabilize and reset itself. From 2022, where there was a lot of, push for valuation funding rounds going on here and there. Of course, some of the not too pleasant news as to the crash of the FTX. You had the JP Morgan, coming against Frank, which was an investment, some that, falsified records and things like that. You saw some of those things. So it was kind of like an up and down scenario in 2022. So the market is in a state of just trying to really balance it out. And now I think the smoke is going to be cleared out of a lot of investors' eyes. Investors are going to be paying critical attention, not just to numbers on paper, but core traction. There's going to be a lot of attention being paid to, sustainable practices, corporate governance, right? There's going to be a lot of looking at the metrics, and you're not going to talk about just calling out figures. So I think that, one of the things that a lot of startups need to start doing right now is really paying attention to their core processes. People are coming back to base. There's going to be a lot of, in-depth due diligence, from stakeholder management to ESG matters to financials to understanding the run rate or burn rate of the capital that you even receive. So fundraising is not just all there is to just, being a startup. It's your sustainability.
So with all this scrutiny that, we're expecting, that means we might see a slowdown, because that means the cash is not going to come out.
Definitely. There's going to be a lot of attention paid to your process rather than just your figures, right? Because of the bad experiences that we are all seeing and all that. So another thing I would like to say is the mass, retrenchment of talented workers from a lot of these global companies, you're going to have a pool of a lot of tech talents, right? So these startups are going to have to position themselves to attract one of the top talents, and also, show that they have internal processes that can lead to sustainability, not just of their profit or income, but of the jobs of their employees as well.
All right, let's look at the trend, expectations. What are you seeing in the horizon, for 2023?
Well, it's going to keep growing. I foresee a situation where you're going to still have a lot of startups coming up to innovate. But it's not going to be as rapid as we expect, because a lot of startups are going to be paying attention to these core things that I mentioned earlier. You're going to see the rise of a lot of agri-tech innovations. The government is paying critical attention now to the agricultural sector. And even in taxation, I also see a situation where the government is trying to enlarge the tax nets. As we know, about 10.1 trillion was raised just last year as a result of taxes that were brought in, and about 59% of that was from the non-oil sector. So you're going to have a lot of attention being paid to revenue generation as far as these startups are concerned. So agri-tech, health tech, edu-tech, those are some of the things that we're going to see. Of course, fintech has always been there, and you just keep growing from there.
That's the darling.
Of course, that's the darling of the tax
system.
So
what kind of legal considerations should these startups, be looking at, before going out there to raise all these funds? Because it's fun when you hear, oh, this startup raised this amount and that amount, but those legal, considerations that protect, both the startups and the investors.
Of course. So depending on the stage of growth for those startups, some startups are in ideation, some are in incubation, some are in the MVP stage, and some are the scaling, and of course, they're trying to expand. At those critical stages, you need to pay core attention to the internal organogram, structure of your business, because one of the fundamentals of corporate governance in itself is managing stakeholder relationships between maybe your board, your shareholders, your employees, and staff, ensuring that those right documents are put in place. At the point of raising seed, whether it's pre-seed, series A, B, or C, you need to pay attention to key metrics as your valuation, your cap tables, and then, of course, stakeholder engagement with your shareholders. Those core documents are very, very critical if you are going to, because you don't want to come to a point in a situation where, for example, the Startup Act basically states that for you to be labeled under the Startup Act, you need to be given a certificate and given a labeled status. For you to even get that status, you must have been less than 10 years, you must be a limited liability company. So companies that are not even up to that or doing that, they have to start regularizing. So I think if anyone is going to take advantage of these critical regulations that are coming in, they need to start looking at the requirements. Okay, do we have our founders agreements together? Do we know what's going to happen in the event of any stage of seed funding? Our papers, our financials, our documents, are they legit? You are not just falsifying records or figures, right? Are you looking at the core internal corporate governance processes of your organization? Startups are not too small to have a board, even if it's an advisory board. So understanding those relationships, ensuring that, those key management processes are iterated, are constantly developed, are managed. Those are some of the things that they have to start paying attention to, because VCs are no longer excited about figures anymore. They want to see the real deal.
They want to see it all.
They want to see the real deal.
All right, thank you so much, Rosemond Phil of our partner, Debo Akande, LLP. It was great having your perspective.
It was so good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.